Welcome back to the Layman's Law School. My name is Chace Hawk, and I'm here with the great and powerful Reid Sanders, my co-host. Yes, and the Layman's Law School is a place where two hillbilly lawyers get together, discuss the issues of the day, and try to demystify the law a little bit. But today, what we're going to be talking about is why lawyers are so great.
Yeah, I should have had my dad on for this. Yeah. He could be here for a few hours telling you that.
Well, I mean, I talked with my dad growing up and about what lawyers do and stuff like that. And I remember one of the things he showed me as we were walking up to this, we were in a national park, Tallulah Gorge, and there was a little railing right there in front of where the overlook was.
Right.
And he was explaining to me, he says, the reason why that railing is there is because that at some point somebody made a mistake and they didn't put some sort of safety up there, and they made the world safer. But we're going to talk about some very specific cases today.
Sure.
Okay, where lawyers kind of made a difference, but it has been mischaracterized. And I'm going to have Genuine here play a clip real quick, and might give you an idea about what kind of case we're going to talk about.
Well, right before that, though.
Oh yeah.
Let's start this Friday off
geez.
correctly. Yeah.
Yes.
Listen. Okay. You always want to get into things so quickly, Chace. Just relax.
Work.
It's after Friday. We've already done the work week. We had a good work week.
Yeah.
It's getting towards the end of the year, so a lot of good resolutions, a lot of happy clients. So that being said, I brought you a Celebration Bud Light. It's a classic.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with it.
Okay.
It's Cheers.
Cheers to you. Oh.
That's the good stuff.
Oh, wow.
That's the good stuff.
Wow. Mother's milk. Yeah.
Please proceed.
Yes, proceed.
Please
Genuine,
proceed.
if you would.
Man, it's hot. How hot is it? It's so hot, I poured McDonald's coffee in my lap to cool off.
Pardon me. Excuse us.
I kind of got pushed and it spilt on me.
Was there a top on it?
Yeah.
Did you put the top on, or did they put the top on for you?
They put the top on.
And they made the top. You didn't make the top, did you?
We got a chance?
Do we have a chance? You get me one coffee drinker on that jury, you gonna walk out of there a rich man.
Now she claims she broke her nose on the sneeze guard at the Sizzler, bending over looking at the chickpeas. So,
Ooh, my coffee was too hot. It's coffee! Plasma getting bigger, Jesus getting smaller. Spill a cup of coffee, make $1 million.
I sued Starbucks because I spilled a Frappuccino in my lap and it was cold. I'm going to sue! Yes, I'm going to sue!
So, Reid, seeing that,
Sure.
what case are we going to talk about today?
Obviously the McDonald's case that's, I don't know. Well, it's got some age on it. What was it, 90s maybe? Late 80s?
94.
94, okay.
Yep.
And just like these, people that are making jokes and
Right.
kind of think it's a funny situation and how it's overly litigious and people are suing for anything and all you got to do is sue and you make $1 million. I believed that as well in 94 at 14, 15 years old.
Sure.
And I think I believed it until I went to law school and had to actually study the McDonald's case. And that was one of the cases they make you study because of how different that media portrayed it versus the actual case.
Yes, and it's part of the reason why we're talking about it here today, because what people don't realize a lot of times, and in these types of cases where you have a big corporation on the other side, is that a lot of times they try to conceal and hide as much as they can some of the things that are in this, like in this situation. That the actual settlement is undisclosed. What they actually settled for, because that the verdict, $2.7 million, was punitive damages or punishment damages, which were awarded. She received about $200,000 in actual compensatory and economic damages for her medical bills. But that was all sealed. What happened after they appealed this, then they settled out of court, and that was all sealed. So she didn't receive millions of dollars.
Right. That's what I was making a point. You were talking about compensatory damages. Essentially, what was reported is that the verdict was, let's call it $10 million. I don't know. It was something big. But even if that stood, which they appealed, and it was reduced and blah, 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 the lady didn't get that money at all. But as a child, growing up, that's all you saw. And David Letterman and Jay Leno is this woman gets millions and millions that she didn't.
Yeah.
And her medical bills, I believe, were more than what she actually received.
Yeah.
Which was, we'll go into about apportionment and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but let's talk about the facts of the case just to start
Sure.
out with. Miss Liebeck, Stella Liebeck, she's 79 years old. She'd gone with her grandson to a local McDonald's. His particular car didn't have cup holders in it. Okay, she was wearing sweatpants. She ordered a cup of coffee, and she had it between her legs, and I'll let her describe it here in a second about what happened, but basically she was trying to get the top off to put cream and sugar, and it spilled on her legs and burned her. If you could play the series of the clips about how this happened from Miss Liebeck's perspective.
Wanted to get the top off to put cream and sugar in, so I put it between my knees to steady it with this hand, trying to get the top off, and it just went, ooh. All I remember is trying to get out of the car. I screamed, not realizing I was burned that bad. I knew I was in terrible pain. I was burned so severely that they didn't think I would live.
I'm a nurse, and I was horrified at the type of injuries that she had sustained, the skin grafts and the pieces that were still ongoing. So it was kind of a shocker because it's one thing to hear, but it's another thing to see.
So, she basically was burned over 16% of her body. It spilled into her crotch. It went into both sides of her thighs, into her genitals. She had third-degree burns. And what the litigation actually revealed was that McDonald's was serving their coffee about 30 to 40 degrees hotter than any other purveyor of coffee, any fast food restaurant. And they were doing this because their study showed that people picked it up on the way to work and drank it at work. They still wanted it to be hot.
That was one of them. Another reason they were doing it, and I remember this very vividly, is that if you keep the coffee above the normal temperature, then it can stay tasting fresh. It's not fresh. It can stay tasting fresh for a longer period of time.
Okay, yeah, so they were doing it for a competitive advantage.
Exactly. They were doing it intentionally to, which you always are trying to make money in business. No fault in that. But that they were doing it at an unsafe temperature to try to make a little bit more money.
That's
a little bit more money.
Yeah, and the plaintiff in this case was able to show that basically within 2 seconds of this hitting your skin, you would get third-degree burns. And that's what happened here in this case. She received third-degree burns to those areas in her, like I said, the genitals, the inner thighs. She had on sweatpants at the time, and so it kind of stuck to her, and it was hard to get off.
Right.
She actually went to the hospital, and they had just had a bunch of car accidents. Her grandson basically took her pants off, put a sheet over, tried to rush her to the hospital, got her to that hospital. They were already treating a bunch of people that had been in a bunch of accidents, and they said they couldn't help her. And by this time, she's going into shock. He takes her to another ER. When the ER physicians there see her, they immediately call the physicians, the burn specialists, and they said it was one of the worst burns that they had seen. And they didn't know if she was going to live based on what they knew was going to be required after this. She spent about eight days in the hospital initially.
Right.
She had to have a bunch of follow-up treatment. She had to have skin grafts done to her legs, and there's this process called debridement. I'll let the doctors and explain a little bit about that. If you could just play that part right there about the actual burns.
Third-degree burn or a full-thickness burn means that the entire layer of skin is burnt through, is gone.
These types of burns require extensive surgeries and a series of skin grafts normally, and of course a bunch of treatment after that just to help her wounds heal. And with bad burns like this, they also have to do something called debridement, which is the removal of damaged tissue from the actual wound, and it is extremely painful. Then there's something called whirlpool treatment, which is used on patients with severe burns that need extensive debridement. And this treatment is so painful, and also it's very, very expensive.
And so, with all those treatments that she had to have, she had thousands and thousands of dollars in medical bills, and her daughter-in-law had to get off of work to help her for about a month after this before she could get up and moving again. And again, this is a 79-year-old woman. It's amazing she was able to make a recovery. They were surprised she lived. And she didn't want to sue initially. She asked him to pay $8,000 or $18,000 for her medical bills and her granddaughter's lost wages.
That's essentially what she was out of pocket.
That's right.
Her health insurance had paid some the majority of the bills, and that all she wanted is just to break even though she'd gone through this. And I think I want to make it clear too that what we're talking about is not liability. We're talking about purely just damages. What has happened?
That's right.
And the reason I think that's important is because this poor lady was just torn to pieces over her damages, and everything we saw on the news, everything we saw on comedy routines, and as you know, I love comedy, and I think that you should have free speech in comedy and all that, but it just undercut her so badly. I felt so terrible for this lady because it just every joke and every newscast was it's a burn. It's not a burn. It almost
and she spilled coffee. You didn't know coffee was hot.
If it would have killed her, it would have probably been better for society than if it didn't. And I'm glad it didn't. But if it had killed her, then it wouldn't have been this talk about, oh, it's a little burn. It's just you spill some coffee. If she'd have died, then what do you say if you're McDonald's?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's no jokes on David Letterman and Jay Leno. If a person dies from, then you really know it's bad. But all that's reported, because it was kept secret, is this money was paid to somebody who spilled coffee on the lap. The end.
Yep. Yeah, and I would encourage anybody that wants to go out there and do it, because you can find just about anything on the internet now. You can actually go and look at the pictures of her injuries, right?
I'd advise you not to.
Yeah, Reid might advise you not to.
Because they are
might be negligent infliction of emotional distress.
Exactly.
But they are absolutely horrifying.
Yes,
and if somebody offered me $10 million right now to do that to me and to pour that kind of liquid onto my and have those types of burns in that area, there's no way. There's nobody would sign up for that. No. And that's part of what brought about the lawsuit, because anytime you have a lawsuit, you have to have duty breach, causation, and damages. And in this case, this is a products liability case. And you had to show that, first of all, that the product, as it was designed and actually manufactured, was unreasonably dangerous and basically created a risk that was unreasonable to the consumer, that they didn't actually warn the consumer in any sort of way, and that the consumer actually used it in a way that was intended.
Right.
Okay. And in this case, there was a little bit of that where she's not supposed to pour it on yourself, but they also knew that, McDonald's knew that they were selling to people in their cars through the drive-thru, so they knew that people were going to have this in their hand and drink it. Sure. And just say, for instance, it wasn't 190 degrees. Let's imagine, what if they gave you a cup and it was 1,500 degrees?
Right.
Yeah, or something crazy, something just outrageous. It was like molten, and you put that to your lips, you would want to sue over it, right? Well, people don't know like the difference between 140 degree coffee and 190 degree coffee, but if you drop 130, 140 degree coffee, you have to sit on your legs for about 20 to 30 seconds before you start getting third degree burns. Okay, 190 degrees, 2 seconds. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Right.
And it's liquid.
That's right.
So it's not. It'd be better if somebody threw a piece of burning wood on you.
Yeah.
Because it's a solid, and this is a liquid that you can't get off of you.
Right.
So that is like you kind of alluded to it a little bit. You're talking about is she using it in the proper way? One of the things that I think really helped, as an attorney, that really helped the plaintiff's side on this is that not only, so you have the heat of the coffee, right? But you still, as an attorney, if I look at the case, I'm still going, well, you still have a lot of negligence on yourself, Miss Plaintiff, because you spilled the coffee. One of the keys to the case, in my opinion, was that McDonald's had ordered a coffee top that didn't quite fit on the cup. And there was complaints about it, and they didn't fix it, and they said they didn't care because they'd already bought the tops.
Yeah.
The top really didn't fit on the cup. So there was a lot of times where they were trying to put the top on the cup, and it just doesn't fit, and people were spilling it. And there was evidence of that over and over and over again. So not only is the coffee too hot, you're putting it into a container that is not appropriate, that doesn't work.
Right.
So that takes a lot of the liability off of the plaintiff in this case, in my opinion. That was a crucial part of the case that is left out in a lot of the tellings of it.
Right, so like it's really hard to remove it. And so
and
when
it
you actually do it, when you
yes.
do a lot of pressure all at once, and it causes it to spill.
Right.
There were some other things about the temperature of the coffee, and also McDonald's notice about the fact that this coffee was extremely hot. What can you tell the listeners about that?
Sure, and so in this, we could talk about this case for hours. So, but one of the things that in premise liability is and this is a product liability, but it's very similar type of law, is notice. And we've talked about it on the podcast before. The person that you're claiming is at fault has to have notice that there's a problem or there's a hazard in a premise liability. And the person that is bringing the claim has to not have knowledge. And it can be actual or constructive. And constructive is you should have known. And that's what everybody's joking about, is this woman should have known coffee's hot. What she should not have known is that it was so hot that McDonald's was making it third hotter than any other coffee in the world. But McDonald's had been on notice, not constructively. They were on notice constructively because they had their coffee hotter than anybody else on the planet. But they had actual knowledge because there was complaints over and over and over. I believe there was over 700 complaints about the coffee burning people.
Yeah, for the last 10 years, this had been the policy of all McDonald's to store their coffee and serve it between 180 and 190 degrees. And in those 10 years, 1982 to 1992, there had been roughly 700 different sort of claimants that had come forward and said, I'm burnt and I need medical care. And McDonald's during that time had basically paid out, I think, $500,000 over those 10 years. And
most of the time, those kind of claims, and we see it on, car accidents or premise liability stuff or even product liability stuff. When you have a case, if it's a small burn, let's say there's $2,000 in medical bills and there's not a lot of treatment and the person is injured. They are injured. McDonald's is going to pay them, $10,000 and they're going to go away and they're going to keep their coffee at 190 degrees because they make $10 million a day off coffee, right? They can pay $10,000 and it doesn't mean anything. The reason that they didn't pay this one is because it was so powerful and so damaging.
It was
to
in the
person.
News.
Right, and the damage were so high that the payments, it's like I talk about a car accident or premise liability. If your injuries are $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and your claim is worth millions of dollars, even when you're right, they're going to fight you every step of the way. If your claim is worth $2,000, they're not going to fight you. They don't care. They're paying the $2,000. So this was a big money item, and this was the one they messed up on. The whole thing blew up because they didn't pay what this poor woman was, out of money on and out of life on and out of work on and all that.
Yeah, and the jury considered a lot of things in this case. They were very thoughtful about it, and one of the things I'll let the juror talk about it, but it had to do with McDonald's and how they approached this whole issue.
We talked about different percentages of how much was her fault versus, how much was McDonald's, and we finally came to assign 20% fault to Mrs. Liebeck because she had initially spilled the coffee. And we assigned 80% of the blame to McDonald's because they had a very long history of people being injured, and they were so adamant that it was such a trivial thing that they weren't going to bother to do anything other than just continue to rake in the money on their coffee sales. And the fact that it was their own records really damned McDonald's as far as I was concerned, because it was very obvious that they knew there was a problem and they were ignoring it completely, just totally disregarding the consumer safety.
Yeah. So Reid, what is she talking about there when she says we assigned blame?
So in different states it's different, but in Georgia we have this. When you have a claim, just because you like I say, I like to talk premise liability because I know that very well. In a premise liability case, you have assumption of the risk, and if you fall into a hole, the hole shouldn't have been there, but maybe you should have seen it. And so a jury usually comes up with a number, what they feel the damages are worth, and then they assign a percentage of blame. And in this case, they found the plaintiff was 20% at fault. Now, if she was 50% at fault, then she would have received nothing. But since she was only 20% at fault, it was essentially McDonald's had to pay 80% of what they found in damages.
Yeah.
So in some states, it's all or nothing. And I'm not sure which state this was in, but in Georgia, we have comparative negligence where it's you compare who was the fault of the plaintiff and the defendant.
Yeah, and so like Reid said, so whatever award she was given was reduced by 20%. So if she was awarded $1,000, that means that the McDonald's would only have to pay $800.
Right.
But in this case, the jury awarded, like I said, to around $200,000 for compensatory damages and $2.7 million for punitive damages. And the reason they came to that number is that apparently worldwide, McDonald's makes in profit $1.35 million on coffee every day.
Every day. Yep.
And so the jury reasoned that the McDonald's was valuing profits over people, and that's a very big theme when it comes to corporate malfeasance. But and they just basically took away their profits for 2 days, and they awarded that amount. That number was actually reduced by the judge significantly. I think it was reduced down to around $400,000, and then both parties appealed, and then they settled out of court. And unfortunately, I think Miss Liebeck died before that ever happened, and the money actually went to her heirs. And so for people to say like she became rich off this thing, all she did was
the good life.
All she did was suffer from the time that it happened to the time that she died, and she never saw the end of it. And died with that sort of pit of injustice where somebody got away with this. And so the fact, the way that it happened, I think, was not in the courtroom. It happened elsewhere. Where did it happen? Talking about lobbyists.
Okay, sure. That's what I was going to get into.
Yeah.
Is so even if it was $2 million and it was upheld, even if it was $100 million if it was upheld, it's not really going to hurt McDonald's. McDonald's is a monster,
right?
A monster. So to hurt them is going to be very difficult. What McDonald's did is they wanted to get ahead of the story, the spin zone, so to speak. And this is early mid '90s. There's no internet, and there is, but it's not part of our lives. And so they had interest groups, special interest groups. McDonald's paid people just millions of dollars to go out and just slam this woman. Go to every newscaster, everywhere they could go into. Into politics to talk about how you needed tort reform because this is outrageous. And so they spent 10 times, 100 times more than what they lost in this case to try to make sure that this never happened again, and they could serve their coffee hot and hurt people.
Yeah.
That's what they did. And they have more money than this poor lady and just made her look like fools. And they did that, and they also villainized the
criminal justice system, the lawyer, system,
her, and the jury.
Yeah.
I've read stories about some of the jurors on this case who were just treated terribly. I mean, people were outside their homes, and how could you do this and all? But to spend that kind of money to say things that just aren't true in the spin zone is just awful. I mean, it is a thing that I can't imagine doing, and then to turn around and villainize this woman that you hurt, and then try to make money off of it. It's just I don't eat at McDonald's. I'll just tell you that.
Okay. So. Nor do I. But yeah, I think that
I eat at gas stations, but not McDonald's. And it's not. That's what I'm saying. It's not the quality of the food. It's just Circle K has never had coffee at 190 degrees that they spilled on me. So
right.
There we
See,
go.
I have a feeling that Reid's going to be studied like 6,000 years from now. And it's like this man is perfectly preserved. How did his body? How is it still perfectly preserved? It's like, well, he ate 700 pounds of preservatives and gas station food throughout his lifetime. But no. Yeah, I think that something ultimately has to be done about the corporate model, because what it forces people to do is it forces people to make decisions that always affect the company and its growth. It always has to grow, and if it doesn't, then the people that are the directors of that corporation are actually liable to the shareholders. They can be sued for making decisions that will cost them money. And I think one of the worst situations or cases that has ever been is the Pinto case in the 1970s.
And that's so what we're talking about next. So Chace, to lead into that, with McDonald's, you're talking about a cup of coffee and a policy, but it's not money that's already been spent by the company.
Right.
And in the Pinto case, we're talking about money that's already been spent, and then because they've already created the product, they've built the product.
Yep.
So the coffee for McDonald's, they can change the policy. That's more damning to me. Now, we'll get into the Pinto and why that's really damning and what they did. But at least I can understand why they did it. In McDonald's, it's more like it was very simple change that you had to make. Pinto's is like, oh, we're going to go out of business, and they value their company over people's lives, and I don't agree with that, but at least I can understand it.
Right.
McDonald's was just insane.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this was actually the first time in U.S. history that a corporation had ever been actually charged with any sort of like products liability as a crime.
Right.
They actually one of the states actually brought a case to actually hold the corporate executives criminally liable, not just civil, which means basically instead of getting money damages, you're going to actually put these people in jail. And so,
on top of that, Chace, you got to remember it's the burden. The burden in a civil case
much higher,
is
much
lower. So if you're bringing a criminal charge, like McDonald's would not be criminally liable in what they did.
No.
They were certainly civilly liable, but the Pinto, it just tells you how damning that the Pinto case is.
That's right. So in 1970, Lee Iacocca had taken over Ford Motor Company, and he was bothered by how Japanese and German companies were coming in and taking so much market share in the U.S. automotive industry with these compact cars, and he was determined to have a Ford American-made vehicle that was going to compete with these compact cars. And in doing so, one of the things that he required was that basically that they cut the timeline in half from actually designing a vehicle to actually producing it and putting it on the market. He had some ridiculous, just arbitrary ideas about the cost of the vehicle, where he was basically saying that the car couldn't weigh over 2,000 pounds. He wanted it compact, and it couldn't cost over $2,000.
Right.
And engineering be damned. And
as long as it ran.
That's right. Exactly. As long as it ran. And what it caused the engineers to do was rush and hurry and not do the proper testing and to cut corners. And they actually found out and knew that what they did was they actually put the gas tank, instead of over the rear axle, they put it behind the rear axle. So if you can see, the rear axle comes across right here. You have your wheels. Then they had the gas. Most people have the gas tank here, and what it does is it gives a lot of cushion to be hit from the rear without actually compromising the tank. And what they did was they put it behind the axle, and it caused the gas tank to be crushed between the bumper and the axle. In these accidents, they had a very thin bumper, and it turned out that the engineers knew about this and had actually come up with an $11 fix for this. And they chose not to do it because it didn't meet the $2,000 mark.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the money was already spent, and it was going to kill their bottom line, and they decided to go money over people.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it was not only it's people get hurt and die in car accidents every day. We have to deal with that, and it's awful and it's terrible. But we also see a lot of car accidents that are, common term is fender benders.
Sure.
And they're hit from behind.
Yep.
Most accidents, you're hit from behind.
Sure.
If you're not, then it's usually a bad accident. So, but generally, you're hit from behind, and generally, it's a couple thousand in property damage. And yes, you may be hurt, but it's soft tissue, and you can get some physical therapy or some chiropractic treatment, and you're usually okay after a few months. This turned those little fender benders into death accidents every time.
Yeah.
You could be hit at 5 miles an hour from behind, maybe less, and you have an explosion that you die from.
Yep.
And that is just, I can't even fathom in a board meeting sitting there saying, they had the evidence of this will kill people.
Yeah.
Now, if we do this, if we do X and it costs us $11 per, but if we do every single car, then we're going to lose money, or we can kill some people. Let's go ahead and kill some people.
Yeah.
That's basically what happened.
Yeah, so this is the reason why Pinto, or the Ford Motor Company, was actually charged with criminally, is that there's something called the Pinto Memo. And it shows that they knew about it ahead of time, that they had accelerators that were sticking. Anytime you press the accelerator halfway down, sometimes it would stick on full auto. There were times where the car was catching on fire just from electrical sparks that were happening during the car running. And then anytime, almost 100% of the time, if the car was hit from the rear at 25 miles an hour or over, 100% of the time, the car, the gas tank would compress and then explode. And I think I have some footage of some of the testing that was done.
And right before you do that, Chace, and that is why every time that you see on movies or people come in and talk to us about car accident, they're like, yeah, I had to run out of the car, get out of the car. Cars don't explode.
Not anymore.
Right. But that's why you have that that's why people have that in their head is because of the
Pinto. Right.
The Pinto exploded.
Yeah. And why don't the cars explode anymore?
Lawyers.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Let's show them what happened before lawyers got involved in this Pinto case. Gas tank's compromised, and then everyone's on fire.
And more than likely dead.
More than likely dead, or terribly disfigured.
Yeah.
It doesn't take too long for you to be disfigured from something like that.
And it's very difficult to get out.
That's right.
Anybody who's been in a car accident, a small car accident, it can affect the way that your door opens. I mean, we've seen it over and over and over again. There's $2,000 in property damage, but you can't get out of the car. It's not like you have to get the jaws of life, but you can't get out of the car quick. Right. If it's on fire and the door is jammed because it was hit from behind, which creates that compression of the door, you're not going to be able to get out. You're going to burn to death.
Yeah.
And outside, I have read, obviously I'm still alive, that burning to death is the most painful way to die. And so that's why I get so upset on this case is they held meetings, they say it again, about what they should do and decided just let it go.
Yeah. So that memo that he's talking about, and it's actually made famous again in the Fight Club movie.
And the memo was the hard evidence. There was testimony that there was actually meetings that were, discussions, and now there are people saying, no, we didn't say that, but more than likely that's what happened.
Right. They had an actual they knew about what happened.
Yeah.
They knew the defect, and then they tried to estimate the cost of a recall.
Yep.
So how much money they would lose if they recalled the cars to fix all these problems, versus how much they would have to pay out if they just maimed and killed people.
Yep.
And they said, okay, well, let's not let anybody know. Let them be maimed and killed, and let's settle out of court and fight them in the court systems. And that's what they did, and they ultimately lost. And that was one of the examples. One of the examples of that was Grimshaw versus Ford Motor Company. Lily Gray was stalled on a freeway in California. She was actually rear-ended. Traveling about 30 miles an hour. The gas tank erupted. The vapors quickly, caught fire and spread throughout the engine. Gray died a few hours later. Her passenger and 13-year-old Richard Grimshaw suffered disfiguring burns, endured dozens of operations. He underwent surgeries for a new ear, nose, and all that, and was scarred over a large portion of his body. And ultimately, the jury came back with a very large verdict. They $2.5 million. Okay, to the Grimshaws, $500,000.
And this is 93?
81.
Okay,
this
93
is 81.
was the video. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah. This is 81, and they had $2.5 million. Okay, for the Grimshaws.
So I mean, I'm just for people listening. I mean, 2.1 is a large number now. Sorry, 2.5 is a large number now, but in 81, that's probably. I mean, I can't
it'd be
do
10
the
million.
math. I mean,
it'd have been
it,
10, 15
minimum.
million dollar, right? And then you have $500,000 to the Grace family, and that's the person who died.
Yeah.
But also, because this memo came out, and they figured out that Ford had valued, again, profits over people.
Right.
And didn't want to put on that $11 part, they issued a verdict of $125 million against Ford to punish them for their conduct. Ultimately, because these companies are very good at lobbying politicians, yes, the politicians write laws that limit punitive awards, punishment damages. So that $125 million was to punish Ford for the bad conduct. Well, the state had already issued a bunch of laws about what you can receiving punitive damages. And sometimes it's a constitutional claim, sometimes it's actual a law claim, but usually a 9 times multiplier of whatever you get is the limit of punitives, right? So what I mean by that is, like, if you get $1 million in compensatory damages, where it's like your economic damage, pain, and suffering, the most you can get in punitives is $9 million. Right. And that's a constitutional type issue. But I think in this case, it was more of a law that California had passed about limitations on punitive damages than anything here, because the judge actually awarded that, and Ford fought that even. I couldn't believe it, but fought that and said, we want no punitive damage award, and the judge said no, but it was a terrible, terrible case of corporate malfeasance.
Let me tell you, I mean, this kind of to bring it all home and with the 2 cases, you still have comparative negligence, all right? And so this is what Ford and Pinto were counting on, is if somebody comes into our office and says, I was hit from behind and something happened in my car and I got severely injured, we're suing the person that hit you. And so when they, being Ford Motor Company, were doing their analysis, that was one of the big keys, is that the only way that these people get injured, hurt, maimed, dead, is if somebody else is negligent and hits them. Right. Which is true.
Yeah.
But so they were banking on that, and it took something horrendous to happen for an attorney to say, and I don't know this for a fact, but if it came to us and there was a death case, and in Georgia there's 25,000 is the minimum coverage. 80% of the people on the road have 25,000, and we have a severely burned person and a dead person, and all we have is 25,000. We're going to try to find another way, and that's what happened in this case, in my opinion. Is the attorney said, we got to find more money for these people, and then why did this thing explode? Why did it catch these people on fire? And to bring it back to today, if you think that this kind of analysis doesn't happen today, you're wrong. There is a program called Colossus, and all these insurance companies use it. They don't care what you look like. They don't care what your name is. They don't care anything about you. You're a number, and they put in what type of injury you have, what type of vehicle you have, and the Colossus machine tells them what they will offer. And that number may be way off of your damages and what has happened to you. So this kind of thing is still going on, maybe not to the extent of how to design a car, but it's certainly going on in the extent of what are we going to pay for damages. And it's just wrong. It's just completely wrong.
Yeah. But before, if you think that Ford got off on this particular thing, you should know that between 1971 and 1976, because of all of these lawsuits, they had to recall 1.5 million vehicles, and that means they had to pay the customers actually for those vehicles to get those back. So you can imagine how much that might have cost, because each one at least cost $2,000. So they did have to pay quite a bit. But because of that, also, we had Mercury, a company that was producing Bobcats. They recalled 30,000 of their actual fuel systems, Bobcats that had fuel system issues that they needed to modify. General Motors recalled 320,000 Chevettes that they had produced between 1976 and 1977 because they realized they might have similar issues, and they didn't want to have the reputation damage or the actual chance of being sued into insolvency. And so those are the ways in which, when I say lawyers are great, okay, when you have, it's the only thing that checks this type of corporate bad behavior. There's nobody else. I mean, it's
David and Goliath.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hardly ever that you have a doctor that reports another doctor. If a doctor is out there committing all these, committing malpractice and just somehow got through medical school and just kind of got through the system and has no business doing surgeries, you don't find that out until he's maimed 5 or 6 people, or killed a couple people. And ultimately, it's lawyers that actually bring those people, I'd say, to justice, but it brings that issue to bear. And it takes people out there that are willing to actually go sit in a lawyer's office and talk about their issue. And for that reason, that's why a lot of personal injury lawyers will do the consultation for free, is because we know that there's a lot of people out there that don't understand whether or not they have a claim, and they just need to sort of say, hey, I don't know, something seems wrong here, and then we're able to, in situations like this, say, yeah, it's you got hit 20 miles an hour from behind, your gas tank shouldn't have exploded. We need to look further into this, you know, and then the lawyer knows how to find, okay, we got a products liability claim. Okay, who do I need to call to do the engineering on this? And so that's really how we can help shape society in a way that people can live their lives and feel like they live in a just place. So they can, like, you know, if something terrible happens or bad happens, they get some measure of a day in court, people to listen to their issue, and then a symbol. And usually it's a money symbol, okay, of we recognize what happened to you was terrible. And here's something to do what we can to make up for it, because we can't give you your life back. We can't put your nose back together. We can't give you new ears or anything like that. But the symbol, the millions of dollars, that's a symbol of us recognizing that your life is significant, that the thing that happened to you is significant. And so that's how, like I say, lawyers are great.
But Chace, like I said, you know, kind of wrap things up and give a tease for next time. So we're talking about companies that are supplying a product that are doing things that can hurt you. Next couple of podcasts, or it might be the next one, maybe the one after that, I'd like to go into something called From Good Hands to Boxing Gloves.
Oh, okay.
And there is a case that, so it kind of moved from somebody who's supplying the product that hurt you. Now you're trying to recover from the insurance company, and now how is the insurance company doing the same thing of cutting costs? And so there's a big case that happened between Allstate and McKinley, and essentially they were came in and tried to tell them how to make money. And a lot of times, most times, if you're a corporation, the way to make more money is to screw the little guy and to screw your clients. And that's what this case is about. And not a lot of people know about it. It's been kind of held under wraps because they don't, Allstate or insurance companies don't supply a product, a tangible product. They're paying for something that somebody else has done. So it kind of went under the radar, but there's some real damning stuff in there, and they got hit hard, and they're still doing it today. And that, I think that it might be eye-opening for some people to hear that case and that story.
Okay, well, good. Well, join us next. Thank y'all for listening, and join us next time as we talk more about companies out there that are valuing profits over people. Thank y'all for listening.